Let me again welcome you to the third panel. The previous panels have set a very high bar for this third panel because they've all been so terrific. So we're expecting an equally terrific performance. Just in case you thought we haven't dealt with the challenges that lay ahead, we've called this panel the challenges that lay ahead. Obviously, the previous speakers have all addressed that also. But we're going to start with Professor Wu, who, in addition to his PhD from Stanford, is the Deputy Dean of the National School of Development. But in addition to those qualifications, he spends his time really between Taiwan and the mainland, but is not going to comment on this weekend's election. But let me turn it over to Professor Wu.
Okay, thank you. So China's local government debt problem has been mentioned in previous session already some questions raised. So I will actually to try to focus and try to answer, if possible, all the questions about local government debt, issues and concerns. So first question we'd like to find out is how bad is the local government debt problem in China. Also, how does it add to the risk faced by China's economy? Here we abbreviate the local government debt problem as a LGD problem, so easy for our later discussion, quicker. So some observers say that the LGD problem to China is like a subprime problem to the United States in 2007. It also like the Greek debt problem to the Eurozone in 2011. And someone even say that the collapse of China's economy is going to start with a default of a local government debt. So I will provide my view on that. Also, can China resolve the local government debt, not only in the short run, as Professor Yu Yongding mentioned, but also in a longer run? So let me first give you some figures. As mentioned by Professor Yu Yongding, the 10.7 trillion yuan. You know the size of China's economy is about 40 trillion. Okay? Actually, the National Audit Office done a thorough survey in June of 2011. 40,000 auditors work on it for 6 months. So they actually classified the GD problem into 3 types. One type is they have responsibilities for repayment. Type 2, responsibilities to guarantee. Type 3 is responsibility to rescue. So you can see the pie diagram here. So about 62% is responsibility for repayment. Okay? It's about 26% of GDP for 2010's GDP. Also, you look at the history of the GD. First peaked in 1998. You remember that year was the Asian financial crisis. So local government debt was used before to rescue China out of a crisis. And then peak again after global financial crisis. So for total composition of GD, local government debt, about 43% is accumulated after the global financial crisis. But this is always in association with the local investment, local government investment. And also for the 2008-2009, it's a part of the 4 trillion stimulus plan adopted by China's government. All levels of government have their thing in the local government debt. Okay? Not only provincial government, the municipal government, also county government. So you can see here, municipal government has the largest share of the thing. And also for the regional division of LGD, mostly in the eastern region. So it's the nature of local government debt. As mentioned by Professor Yu Yongding, actually the local government has their own budget problem. They cannot issue government bond. But they actually have many things to do. They have education, social welfare, etc. But for investment purpose, to promote the growth of a local region, they need to rely on the additional channel so that actually to promote growth. It's a part of a stimulus plan. For Eastern region, they try to promote the growth. So it's not really due to social welfare concern. For the Western region and Central region, they didn't play such a large role as the Eastern region. Who owes the money? Who owes the money? It's a creation of what we call local government funding platform. It's also a kind of special Chinese characteristic. So certainly the local government actually sometimes just owe the money, like 23%. But the rest is through some kind of creative arrangement. So this is actually Chinese characteristic, especially for GD. It's for local government funding platform. Okay? It's somewhat difficult to go into the details of these companies. So it's created by local government by giving them some tax revenues or some kind of promise from government, the land transferring fees, etc., so that they can borrow money from banks. So this due to the Chinese system of tax reform in 1994, that local government actually they collect tax for central government. They don't get to use the tax revenue so easily. So actually, the tax revenue is in the central government. All these responsibilities, for example, social welfare, education, in the hand, on the shoulder of local government. So in order for investment purpose, they have tried to, through this channel of local government funding platform. So they use different kinds of method to get funding. So usually it's difficult to get to the bottom of it, but we can only rely on the data from the National Audit Office. So who lends the money? 80% from bank, 80% from bank. Okay? So actually, we're going to cause some kind of back loan problem for the bank. Also, about repayment tension. For this 10.7 trillion yuan, you can see certainly the repayment tension is most severe in the past year, 2011, and also quite severe in the forthcoming year. Okay, but it will decline over time. So in terms of the long run situation, certainly we can be a little relieved. But this doesn't tell you the whole picture. So we still need to come back to the worry by Professor Yu Yongding, because they need to roll over the debt over time. Okay? So that they repay it, but they roll over, they issue the new counter debt. And there's a different data by the China Banking Regulation Commission. They said about 24% of this 10.7 of different figures in the Banking Regulatory Commission. But they say it's about 24%. We are going to apply the 24% to give us an estimate about the total size of a bad loan. Also for total size of bad loan, the Moody's have a higher estimate. They say not 10.7, it's 14 trillion yuan. So we can also take that into consideration to see if we are so pessimistic, how large is the burden to China's economy. So that Professor Yu Yongding mentioned the total debt, the central government's debt and local government debt together is about 53% of the total GDP of China. But if we want to be a little more pessimistic, use all these numbers, Okay, also use IMF numbers. Okay, IMF numbers says China's government debt, central government debt, is about 33% of GDP. Together, it's still about 60% of the total GDP. So the answer to the first question I posed at the beginning, the total size of the GDP problem as compared to the size of China's economy may be manageable. Okay, it's a total size added to the central government's debt is still around 60% or so. But there are some risks actually we can discover from the GDP problem. Also, this should be the direction of reform, especially public finance reform. Professor Lu Feng mentioned in his lecture. Because this kind of central government, local government division of tax revenue was introduced in 1994. Caused all the kind of problems for local government expenditures. So actually, we need to reform the public finance into the future in order to really overcome the GDP problem. So the GDP problem shows that there's a lack of monitoring channel for local government debt raising and the usage. Okay, as Professor Yu Yongdi mentioned. Okay, they just go to another position in a central government on a 4-year term. Okay, then left behind some debt for the local government. There are also inefficient corporate governance that led to some kind of inefficient investment in a local area. Okay, it's also troublesome. Also, in the local government funding platforms, they rely so much on land transferring fees. Okay, certainly, if you look into the future, as the real estate market drop, the price of the real estate market drop, then there are going to be some problem for the promise to repay the loan. So, starting from maybe 18 months ago, the Chinese government started to pay attention to the GDP problem. Okay, some regulations adopted by the Chinese government. So I will not go to the detail of it. But recently, the new financing by GFP has been prohibited. Okay, July of last year. Also, in October, there's a change in this kind of public finance structure. So 4 different places have been allowed to issue local government debt. Okay, so it's actually a reform in the right direction. And they issue the debt quite successfully, like Shanghai, okay, and Shenzhen, some other places. So let me just come to the general prospect for the GDP problem. Okay. I agree with Professor Yu Yongdi. For the next 2 years, it may be okay. Okay. And first, that the total size of bad loan is not that large. Okay. We use 24%, this kind of bad loans to estimate the total bad loan from the local government debt. You get about 2.5 trillion at the maximum. So for the China's total loan, it's about 50 trillion. So you add to the non-performing loans about 5%. Certainly, it's a problem, but it's a manageable problem. Okay. And also, for the problem occurred in last year in Yunnan province, and also in Shanghai, already occurred some problem with local government debt. The central government stepped in. Okay, the central government in a good public finance situation, so will come to rescue. So that should be okay, for the short term. But for long term, I think certainly in order to resolve the long-term problem, we need to push forward more reforms in public finance reform to strengthen fiscal discipline, also to have a more reasonable tax sharing between the local government and the central government, and also to allow the local government to issue the bonds by themselves, so that they must have this kind of balance sheet. Now there's no balance sheet for local government. We introduce more discipline. So in order to overcome this kind of problem into the future, beyond the 2-year horizon, as Professor Yu Yongdi mentioned, we need to push for reforms. And more growth, more sustainable growth into the future, then we will see the local government debt problem as minor, in the process. So it's quite different from the subprime problem. Certainly I mentioned some reasons already. Also, this subprime problem is the cause of global financial crisis. A GD problem is actually response to global financial crisis. They are actually different kind of problem. So I'm still quite optimistic if we reform can come forward. Thank you.
Our next speaker thank you, Professor Wu. Our next speaker is the head of the China Center for Economic Research and is, the moving force behind this forum. So welcome, Professor Yao Yang.
Thank you. Already here, right? Okay. Today I'm here to talk about income distribution and household consumption in China. We have already seen all the statistics that the share of consumption, especially household consumption, is declining, and many people believe it has a lot to do with Social Security. But here I would like to say actually income distribution could be much larger effect. And I want to link income distribution with Social Security. And this is the Euro figure we see. Right? So this is the government consumption as a share of GDP. This is household consumption as a share of GDP. So it has been declining really fast to barely like 35% versus more than 50% 30 years ago. And this is the other side of the issue, that is, this is a national saving in GDP. So this is government saving as share of GDP. This is corporate saving as share of GDP, and this is household saving as share of GDP. What I want to emphasize here, of course, we should pay attention to household saving, but on the other hand, you can see corporate saving and government saving as shares of GDP are increasing quite dramatically in the last decade. Okay. When we talk about the declining share of household consumption, most people would say two things. So one is housing prices. Okay. You can, of course, that's a strong reason behind the rising saving rate in China. But even we deduct savings for housing, that's about, I think, 17% of household income. But still we have like 20% of household income saved. Right? So still quite a large chunk that cannot be explained by rising housing price. And another one is a lack of Social Security. That's quite intuitive. Right? If people do not have Social Security, like health care, pension, they're not going to consume that much today. They have to save for the future. Okay. But then we have to pay attention to income distribution. So this is data from our recent survey, so COPS, China Family Panel Studies, that has been done by Peking University. So we have a national representative survey. So this is the distribution of income using our data. So this is a lower 10% up to the highest 10%. And the gap is huge. The average income of the highest 10% is actually 83 times of the average income of the lowest 10%. Actually, that's about the U.S. level. If we break up the up 10%, there's still a huge difference between the richest 5% and the next richest 5%. So 75,000 per head versus 30,000 per head. So that's still quite substantial. One thing I want to make it clear is that most of those people, say people about 60% here, have already got Social Security of some sort. You know, most of them are urban people, right? And most of them have formal jobs. So in that case, they do have Social Security. And those guys who do not have Social Security are actually quite poor. And their shares in consumption are very, very low. Even if we're going to see beyond the effect of Social Security, the overall effect to the whole economy could be very small. So that's the essence of this talk. Okay. So actually, I was talking about that. Let me show you the data. So this is the Social Security coverage in our data. So this is for the countryside. We only do two medical insurance, and the other one is pension. Medical insurance, I want to warn you, you can see this is actually a number is now very low, right? This is on personal level, okay? So it's about 50%. But the program is really rudimentary, right? So the premium is about 120 yuan per year. So that's kind of the official data. Even with that, that's not a full coverage. This is also quite different from our official data. And then look at the pension, it's almost long over there, less than 10%. This is in urban area, this is healthcare, and this is pension, and this is housing fund. What's a housing fund? Housing fund is that your employer contributes money to an account. So this is basically the Singaporean model. And you can draw from that to buy houses. And that's actually a big deal. So you can have access through this fund to no-cost mortgage. Okay, and this coverage actually is quite, it's not high, but quite substantial. Okay, so now then our experiment is, let's say we increase the healthcare coverage, pension coverage in the country to 100%. What's going to happen to consumption? And then we do the same to urban residents. Let's increase them to full coverage in the family. What's going to happen, right? So those are the results by quantile. So this is, let's say, for the countryside, okay? So this is the effect. So if you look at the lowest, the 10% of population, if we give them full coverage of healthcare, then the effect actually is quite large. 20% increase of their consumption. That's actually quite substantial, right? But look at the share of consumption. That's it's minimal, okay? So you can see this declining effect when you have a higher income, and you have a higher share of consumption when you have higher income. So use this one times this one, you get this effect, okay? So much more moderate. This is for urban area, for health, medical insurance. So you get similar results, but actually smaller, because I think even here you do not see any effects, actually negative effects. So you give them more healthcare insurance, they're going to reduce consumption. So in the end, you're going to see a more moderate effect. Okay, and if you aggregate them together, you're going to also add in those negative numbers on the higher end. And this is for pension, same story. And this is for housing fund, okay? And adding them together, so that's the final result I want to tell you. So this is official data, right? Household share of consumption in GDP was 35%. And then national saving rate, 52%, okay? So if we have a full coverage you know, everything adding up together, only medical care only. Minimum, right? 0.8% increase of total consumption. It's an astonishingly small number. There will be almost no change to the saving rate, right? So let's suppose we increase healthcare both in the countryside and in the city, and also pension in the city. We don't want to look at the pension because the pension is only minimum in the countryside. And also housing fund in the city. What's going to happen? We're going to get a larger effect, but still quite moderate, right? Only in consumption as a share of GDP is going to increase only by 3.5%. Okay, on the same, in the same time, the national saving rate will decline by the same magnitude. You know, that's still quite substantial. 48.5% of national saving rate, right? It's still the highest in the world. Okay. That's basically because of income distribution. So if you look at income distribution, this is a share of household income in GDP. Has been declining secularly in the last decade or two. So now it's actually very easy to remember China's income distribution at large. Household sector, 50%, corporate sector, 25%, and the government, 25%, right? So I think that this is a more important than kind of using Social Security as an argument. And also, as I said, the government is contributing huge savings to China's overall saving rate, right? About 10% of GDP. If you look at the government's saving rate, it's actually higher than household saving rate in most of the years. So if you think, you know, Chinese people love to save, the Chinese government loves even more in that sense. So it's much, you know, to improve income distribution takes a long, long time. You're not going to see income distribution to become better in the next 10 years or so. I'm sorry. On the other hand, it's very easy to do government transfer, right? To reduce the government saving rate and then move money to the household sector. That's going to automatically increase consumption, okay? And the other thing is that the government is spending huge amount of money on infrastructure. If you look at this is Dan Rosen's data. He shows in the last several years, 7, 8 years, 30% of bank loans have gone into infrastructure, right? And much of those loans are guaranteed, at least guaranteed, to say the least. Much of it actually borrowed directly by the government. If we can reduce those infrastructure investment by the government, then we can channel more money into the household sector. So I think a big task for China, and also kind of a myth to explain China's economic growth model, is why the income has been consistently shifted from the household sector to the corporate sector and the government. We still do not have a satisfactory answer, but at least our study has shown if you only focus on the household sector, we are not going to solve the problem. I will stop here. Thank you.
There's a lot of conversation about what the green economy means for business, means for U.S. China economic relations. So we're thrilled today to have Jintao with us to talk about that. And as you see from his bio, he is the chair of the Department of Environmental Management at the College of Environmental Sciences and Engineering at Bad Peking University. Professor Xu.
Yeah, thank you. Let me try that. Okay. We talked about China's phenomenal economic growth. China has been the fastest growing economy in the world for 3 decades. But as an environmental economist, always had the problem that Chinese people also suffer the most damage in environmental pollution and depletion of natural resources. And I remember 2 days ago, there was a distinguished panel in Chicago, American Economic Association Annual Conference, and including several Nobel Prize winner and Larry Summers and President of World Bank. A lot of them talk about the challenges affecting China's sustainability of economic growth for the next decade or two. Environmental issues recognized by most of them as one of the challenges. And China has to overcome all these challenges in order to sustain economic growth, and agree 100% with them. And if we go back to like 15 years ago and trace the trajectory of China's economic growth and those environmental issues, and so empirically we found out there's a interesting figure called 8% growth rate, like discussed by Professor Yu Ding. Every time our growth rate is higher than 8%, then our the growth rate of energy consumption, natural resource extraction, and also industry pollution will be higher than 8%. If the economic growth rate is lower than 8%, those other growth rates will be lower than 8%, lower than GDP growth. So really, it's an interesting phenomenon that if we pursue a very high economic growth, basically the growth is increasingly induced by higher pollution, higher energy consumption, and higher use of natural resources. So, and the recent, especially starting from last 5 years, we observe a major turning point that environmental control, environmental protection became a national policy instead of a sectoral policy. So before, 5 years ago, like it's mainly the effort of environmental protection agency. But starting from our 11th five-year plan, environmental issue became a key word from our frequently from our national leaders, and it triggered a turning point from my point of view that China, first of all, starting from the 11th five-year plan, China has a explicit goal of environmental improvement and the reduction of emission and the reduction of natural resource use, and also reduction of energy incentive in terms of per unit GDP. But that was not, it highlights the change of national policy. But I would say, if you're looking at the statistics, the effort was not very successful, because the target was energy intensity was 20% lower compared to 2005 level per unit GDP sense, and also total emission of COD and air pollution should be down by 10% in aggregate. But those goals are barely met, and by end of 2010, we have to reach all these goals. A lot of the local government simply shut down the electricity for many weeks for residential use and industry use in order to meet those goals. So we would say, from national statistics, all these energy intensity goal and the pollution reduction goal are met, but with very bad measures. And we have to come up with a better approach, and those needs, or I would say, are recognized by central government, and there are a lot of new elements in our 12th five-year plan. I will show it later. So basically, from from 11 five-year plan to 12-year plan, the major change is that we will continue the effort of energy saving and emission reduction. And the goal are a little bit more modest, but the effort will be continued. It is a good news for us. Secondly, we will incorporate our climate policy into the 12 five-year plan. So, the list here is a major component of a 12 five-year plan that's relevant to environmental protection. Basically, the major component is continuation of energy saving and emission reduction. And also, we'll implement a lot of industry policy. We have a specific new work plan for energy saving and emission reduction, but we also had a new work plan for controlling CO2 emission. And China committed to CO2 reduction, emission reduction in Copenhagen. And the government announced that no matter what happens in the international negotiation process, we will implement our commitment in the 12 five-year plan. This was shown in the real plan. And the plan included basically two major elements. One is administrative element, another is economic policy. The administrative elements used to be all of the policy. In the 11 five-year plan, it's basically target and evenly distributed target among local government. Chinese government like to use like a percentage target, such as energy incentive, intensity. Then the target was easier to be allocated among local government because it's a percent, no matter how high your GDP was. And you basically, the local target will be according to the national target. So by end of five-year plan, every province was supposed to report to government that they meet the national government, like 20% reduction of energy consumption per GDP sense. But in the 12 five-year plan, the target was reduced to 16%. This reflects two issues. First, the marginal cost of the energy intensity reduction was higher if you're already down 20%. And the second is the realization of the actual cost of doing so. In 11 five-year plan, the fact that local government have to shut down electricity for several weeks or several months, even good provinces like Zhejiang, Jiangsu, reflect that difficulty of achieving those goals without additional measures. And the goal has to be more modest this time around. But the major problem we realized in the 11 five-year plan was that it's mainly a command and control measure. As economists, we always want government to think about economic instrument, taxes, cap and trade, all this market approach. But once it gets started, the government intends to use administrative measure. And the difficulty of implementing those measures are reflected in our 11 five-year plan. But this time around, a lot of progress is at least philosophical progress made in the 12 five-year plan is that economic instrument was considered into the policy package. Basically, there will be a lot more investment in my colleague Wang Jinan estimates in the next 5 years there will be a 3 trillion RMB investment from central government on environmental protection. So that's very similar to the stimulus Chinese government used in the last 5 years. And secondly, there will be a price reform. For the last 20 years, Chinese government, when they think about the economic instrument, they had a lot of influence from U.S. academics. Basically, carbon trade was promoted by a lot of scholars in China. We had at least 20 carbon trade pilot projects on SO2 in the last 20 years, but it all failed. And now Chinese government is turning their focus more on pricing reform. Basically, we are going to raise price on water, on energy, and also we turn in the consumption area. The government already announced we adopt stepwise price on residential electricity use and residential water use. And in our #1 document this year, the focus, not this year, 2011, the focus was on irrigation and water sector reform. And another focus will be pricing reform in water resource allocation. The third area of economic policy will be tax and fee. And the government already issued a new law on natural resource tax last year. And we're going to implement a natural resource tax on natural gas, coal, and oil. And it was a local tax. It served many good purposes. And also, the government also announced that starting from 2012, there'll be pilot implementation of environmental tax, basically converting pollution levy into a taxation system. Thirdly, the NDRC also announced, starting from this year, we will try out carbon tax. And there's also financial policy, basically giving credit, the banking system will giving credit to environmental friendly industries and projects. And we'll expand our ecological composition scheme from, now we have a forest ecological composition scheme, but the NDRC expressed interest that the environmental composition mechanism will be expanded to many other areas. So a lot of economic industry going to be implemented in these 5 years. And a lot of green opportunities. Okay, I'll skip them. Basically, I'm not good at identifying business opportunities, and you are better than me. But so basically, so a lot of interesting items, like China used to only focus on pure electricity vehicles, but now the policy basically are more embracing other type, like hybrid vehicles. And the official target is by year 2020, there will be 5 million vehicles produced as hybrid vehicles, and roughly 50% of total vehicle in use on the market. And there are a lot of new energy projects and promising areas. And people ask me about shale gas. Shale gas is not yet technically feasible and widely used, but government has a lot of interest, and actually already late last year already implemented several new policies. Basically, basically people find in China that the reserve could be, and the technically feasible reserve could be the largest in the world. And the government classified shale gas as an independent mineral type. And also government has a policy for international investment. And not only China Sino-Petroleum is trying to purchase project in the U.S., but also Chinese government would like to welcome international investors to come to China, help China to develop shale gas industry. So there are a lot of promises in those areas. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Well, let me thank all the panelists for a great presentation, and take the moderator's prerogative and ask the first question before opening the period, opening questions to the floor. The conference today has almost tangentially touched on an issue that has been very central to discussions of the U.S. China economic relationship, which is that since the stimulus plan for almost 30 years, the growth in China was dependent upon what was effectively the increasing role of the private sector, that the state sector was shrinking, the private sector was growing. Since the stimulus, that has reversed. That as a result of both direct government expenditure and bank loans to SOEs rather than private sector, that has reversed. Number one, do you think, and this is for any of our panelists, do you think that's true? And I think probably you all agree. And second, if it is true, is this going to be reversed? Or is this a new development model that the Chinese government has now adopted?
Good job. Local finance.
The tough question. You need to guess the intention of the government.
Well, first of all,
as you mentioned before, it's a leadership transition now. So it's hard to predict how the leadership is going to think for the future. But I guess I can first respond by saying that you are right. Okay? It's a V-shaped. Okay? In the past, we look at the profit of the SOEs, it's declining. Okay? But after 2008, it's increasing. Okay? It's V-shaped, roughly like that. So that due to several reasons. One reason is that they consolidated the SOEs, have the strongest remaining in the industry. Secondly, mostly in the monopoly area. Okay? So that to resolve the problem, one thing is that the Chinese government need to actually implement the anti-monopoly law more rigorously. Okay? Also, at the same time, try to get the SOEs out of those kind of area. Also related to this kind of price reform for the factor price reform, like a resource price reform, etc., so that they can get this kind of price correct for the factor price market, and also try to make the environment more competitive. So that they need to adopt several policies into the future. Okay? But it's hard to predict it at this point. Maybe Professor Yao Yang can add something.
Well, actually, I'm not that worried about the state sector. Those firms, SOEs that have been left out, I think about 10,000 of them still. Most of them are quite strong because they have been selected, so the government return them. There is a reason behind that, because they are profitable. I'm more worried about on the government itself, because the government is controlling more and more resources through various channels. Right? The share of tax is increasing steadily. Some people say government is controlling 30% or more than 30% of GDP. It's actually larger than the U.S. government. So that's a big danger. Another one is the government is controlling the financial sector through this local fundraising platform and other kind of handlers. Right? So I think that's more dangerous. And I also don't think allowing local governments to issue debts is a good idea. We should go strict to enforce the budget law. Local governments should not have the right to issue debts. Otherwise, we are going to see the debts to explode. Okay, and they can use the local financing platform to bear debts. Why not using the formal channel to bear debts? You're not going to prevent that. So I think yes. To answer Steven's question, yes, there is a. And this trend is very dangerous, and I hope that some, at least in all the cases, if you want government to change, you have to have some crisis. No, I'm not saying that I'm in favor of crisis, but hopefully the local debts issue can ring a bell to the government and say, we should stop this.
Let me open the floor to questions. And if you've asked a question before already in this morning, please wait until those who have not asked a question. I see somebody back, kind of, yes. A woman in a black, yes, there. Right there, yeah.
Thank you. I'm so happy to hear Professor Xu talking
please
about...
identify yourself.
Oh, sorry. My name is Shengmei Hu. So I'm so happy to hear Professor Xu talking about China's greener economy. Obviously, it's very hard to imagine a sustainable economic development can happen without consideration of environmental protection. But the bottom line is that in many cases, there is a trade-off between high economic growth and environmental protection. So my question is how, Professor Xu, you would assess the impact upon China's economic growth in this year or maybe in longer term, of the constraints set by environmental protection. Thank you.
It's hard to answer that question, but environmental protection is not only a cost, it could be a benefit too. And China has probably over-polluted the environment that it should be, and because there wasn't effective policy to reduce pollution. And you talk about statistics about consumption, population, and the performance of environmental protection was also very overstated. If you think about the impact of environmental protection on economic growth, first we have to do some evaluation on the damage made by environmental pollution and the potential benefit of improving the situation. Over the last 10 years, environmental economists field made a lot of effort try to come up with a green GDP estimates. So people conducted evaluation on how much damage done by environmental pollution and the cost of changing the situation. Basically, the most conservative estimate of the damage of environmental pollution is like 3% of national GDP in around year 2005. And the high estimate is like 12%. And I would believe something in the middle, like 8%, because the low estimate is basically a cost estimate, how much you need to, how much it was needed to reduce pollution to an acceptable level. It's not a benefit estimate. And if you spend money to improve environment, certainly you improve the national welfare, not necessarily GDP, but national welfare. And at the end of the day, it's the quality of growth matters, not the rate.
Ms. Pong here.
I'd like to thank you, the panel, very much for the excellent presentation. And I'm Virginia Pan, CEO of UB Eco Solutions, Inc., and also board member of a Chinese nutraceutical company. And more importantly, Steve, I've been a member of the National Committee for over 20 years. So now I'm dating myself. I have a question for Professor Jintao. My question is that clearly China, besides looking at all the domestic challenges, clearly is looking at inventing or creating new green technologies as well. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more about what the new government incentive programs would be for this new industry in the next 5-year plan, and what some of the details might be.
It's difficult for me to come into details, but basically, as I said, the estimate of total government investment on environmental protection-related industry could amount to 3 trillion RMB in the next 5 years. It's a lot of investment, but it's aggregation of many things, like pollution control, urban urban environmental improvement, sewage treatment, all these things aggregated together. So,
Frank.
Frank Kale, excuse me, United States China Exchanges Incorporated. I have a question for Professor Wu on the issue of local government debt. I think of the big risk there as essentially being a non-performing loan problem. 15, 20 years ago, China had a massive non-performing loan problem, which caused the 4 big banks to create asset management societies to take the loans off the books and then try to deal with them. Those non-performing loans were essentially state-owned enterprises. Now, in the case of the local government debt, we're talking about local jurisdictions who have essentially as their collateral land and who have essentially as their incentive GDP growth if they want to ascend in the social system. We've also seen recently that the Wukan village in Lufeng municipality has a big problem with land sales. It's been essentially presented as a corruption problem, but maybe hearing what you said, it's more a structural problem. So the question, has the government learned anything from the non-performing loan problem of the last decade or so? And what are the implications for social order if things don't get worked out structurally?
Okay. So actually, there are 2 parts of the question. One is the non-performing loan itself. The other part is the social order. It's a social instability problem associated with the land transferring fees. Okay, I think the government try to deal with these 2 problems through different channels. Okay, for the non-performing loans, actually this estimate of 24% is some kind of pessimistic estimate. For some of, for example, like Liu Mingkang that Professor Yu Yongdi mentioned, that also talk about the local government debt, and his estimate is more optimistic. So 24% loan to be a bad loan, we use 10.7 trillion as the denominator. To multiply by 24% is about 2.5 trillion renminbi as bad loans. So that's for China. It's I think is not as severe as the period you mentioned. Okay, for non-performing loan for big state-owned banks, it's not as serious as that period. First, secondly, that for this for already happened in the past year was Yunnan province has this kind of default. And also Shanghai has some default problem. And the central government stepped in immediately, try to reduce any worry about the default, the domino effect of the local government debt default. So I think the government realized the importance of dealing with the default problem. They had learned from the past experience. They try to stop this kind of worry about default for local government debt. So because with this kind of experience from past, I think that they will deal with the local government debt default immediately and quickly to resolve the kind of worry. As for the land acquisition, it's a more broad question. It's actually it's for the China development because of urban-rural divide. Okay, they try to for the next 5-year plan, 12th 5-year plan, the central focus is try to smooth this kind of transition from rural to urban area. So going to be the focus for the next 5 years. So there's a lot of concentration and the experiment on the land system. They also mentioned briefly by Professor Lu Feng, it's about on the agenda of Chinese government reform It's about how to consider land property right. Okay, give the farmers more protection for the land right. Okay, actually, in the several area, like in Chengdu, Chongqing, in Sichuan province, some experiments try to actually have auction of the land. Okay, the local government get from rural area, try to auction to the urban developers, so that they get money back to the farmers, more money back to farmers. So it's I guess the agenda of the reform about land property right and then the acquisition system. In the last, I guess, government rule says very clearly, in the future, there should not be acquisition of land by force of the local government. So actually, there's actually a lot of attention, a lot of concern about this kind of social instability caused by land acquisition. Okay.
So I not be accused of being a rightist, let me go over to the left side and then to the center. Right here, and then I'll come to the center, so I end up right in the middle.
Hi, my name is Andy Liu. I'd actually ask a question to Dr. Yu Yongding about the mortgage loans. So Dr. Yu cited that the central government actually tested, even under the scenario that the house price will go down by 50%, then the banks can still recover 100% of the loans. And my question is actually that whether the government will take the consideration of the social discontent introduced by this and then step in as the government step in the local government debt case. And if that were the case, then how much impact will that be on the central government balance sheet? Thanks.
You want to give a microphone to who wants to answer? Let's hear you. Yao Yang, you want to answer?
No, it's Director Yongding. Yongding is obliged to answer.
I think it's not fair. Okay. Technically, I think government can do that. But I think you raised a very important question. Why should government to put all those bills? Actually, why ordinary people should put that bills? It will be a very, very serious political question. I think this is really a very good question. But unfortunately, I can't answer this question here.
All right, now in the center. First there, and then, yeah, there you go.
Hou-Mo, Vice President of CCER International. Since we just mentioned about the local government debt and also the state-owned company, I have a question asked on behalf of the small and medium-sized company with headquarters in China. As you know, there are a lot of problems faced by those companies because it's very hard to take the advantage of the main stock exchanges in China. And a lot of those companies came out and to explore opportunities here in the U.S. capital markets. But the U.S. capital markets are not very friendly at this moment because of the concerns of accounting fraud issues. So I have a question, which is, what is the government policy to encourage the development of small to medium-sized company, which contribute a significant contribution to the global China development and economic growth?
This is a big question. I mean, first I want to emphasize, this is not just a China phenomenon. This is actually a global phenomenon. You ask any country, even in this country, SMEs are not that easy to get loans. But of course, in the United States, the financial intermediaries are more advanced than China. They have all sorts of means to give credits to SMEs. But in China, I think the basic problem is the underdevelopment of the financial sector. some people in China would think, hey, we have a wonderful financial sector. See, we do not have a financial crisis. But eventually, that's because the financial sector in China is so underdeveloped, so we are kind of insulated by this backwardness. But in the meantime, there are a lot of costs associated with this backwardness of financial sector. I mean, this is just one area of the whole problem, but I think that's the most important one.
Yes. Maybe I can add a little bit. So for the small and medium-sized enterprise, they accounted for a major portion of employment. So especially in this kind of economic downturn, that the government tried to help the small and medium-sized enterprise in order to improve the employment figures. So that for all the kind of banks in China receive this kind of instruction from the central government, they need to increase the loans to small and medium-sized enterprise. So most of banks established a special department of small and medium-sized enterprise loan. Okay, so that has been this kind of effort in the last 2 years or so after financial crisis to increase loans to small and medium-sized enterprise. This is what I can see. Also, the other way is to promote development of small shareholder banks, because they actually give out more loans to the small, medium-sized enterprise. It's actually happening in the southern provinces in China now. There's some degree of improvement, but it's certainly there's more need for the help for small, medium-sized enterprise.
Time for, well, I pointed to it, this gentleman and then this lady. Make it a very short one, and then we'll answer it, and then we'll have our closing remarks. This gentleman here and then this lady there. All in the middle.
Hi, my name is Fei Liu. I'm a student from Columbia University. Actually, I'm personal studying actuarial science, so I'm very interested in Professor Yao's question. Like he said that even like giving full healthcare coverage, yeah, we couldn't solve the problem like consumption, increased consumption. Like, but you said that the annual premium is only 120 yuan, which is half the bill, like cost of my washing my teeth for once. So, do you think that offer the Social Security that enough to lower the saving rate? That could you elaborate more on that? Okay, thank you.
And then we'll also, before answering that, take that final question right there, and then we'll answer them together.
Hi, good morning. My name is Cheng Ye, and I work for Merrill Lynch as a financial advisor, managing the wealth for a select of high net worth individuals and families. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation, especially on very difficult and sensitive questions and problems of the inequality and environment. So we kind of reached a consensus that the future increase in the Chinese economy will drift from being investment-driven to the consumption-driven. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the micro side. So Dr. Huang elaborated a lot on those kind of Chinese shoppers on the Fifth Avenue. I'd like to say that those kind of consumers represent 1% of the consumers in China, or at best 5%. If we want to achieve those kind of growth, consumption-driven growth in an organic way, we have to think of the majority, which is 80% of the small households on the central part or the southern part, western part of China, non-coastal cities. And as I can see, those kind of small households.
What's the question? What's the question? I said a short one.
Yeah, how can the consumption-driven increase in the Chinese economy be realized?
12 5-year plan, that's the answer.
Yeah, they have very stagnant salary increase.
Okay, we're out of time, and I want to give them each chance to answer whichever question you prefer.
Okay, I will answer this saving question. I mean, basically the idea is for the precautionary savings. So if you do not have Social Security, you feel uncertain about the future, so you save more. So that's kind of the basic idea behind this kind of proposition. In that case, of course, there is also kind of a direct substitution effect, right? So if you can ask the insurance company to pay your bill, of course, you consume more. But the more or less, economists look into the precautionary saving more. So that's also why I say income distribution is very important, because most of the savings are contributed by the top 20% in China anyway. And they all already have good health care, good pension, like we do. We have really good health care. Comparatively speaking, we have good pension. So in that case, there's not going to be a huge effect if you give health insurance or sort to the people.
Okay, so maybe I say a little bit about consumption. It's Yiping's specialty. But for consumption in United States, on history contribute to growth of United States, okay, not to China. From my personal experience, actually, besides luxury goods, there's a kind of household goods in China are somewhat relatively expensive, more expensive than sold in the United States. So when I buy shirts, for example, I go to Hong Kong or go to Taiwan to buy shirts, not in China. So actually, there's a lot of things the Chinese can do to improve consumption, besides income distribution, improve income distribution to make people more willing to spend, increase social insurance. At the same time, from supply side, besides demand side, there's also supply side. From supply side, they need to make the transition or transmission of goods in China more easily. Also can import more goods from abroad. Also to look at this kind of selling channel in China, there are also this kind of big mall and expensive department store. They should have some kind of more channels to sell goods so that people can get relative inexpensive goods. In Walmart here, you buy all the kind of goods made in China. It's about half price of what you can get in China. Okay.